On June 5th, 2021, Ocean World Marine Park was buzzing with excitement. The audience had gathered to celebrate the 300th live performance of senior Orca trainer Emily Cadeaux. But what was meant to be a milestone moment turned into a nightmare. Within moments of the performance, an 11,000-pound orca named Vesper broke formation. What followed was a terrifying display of raw power as the massive predator unleashed its primal instincts in front of 2,500 stunned spectators. Emily, once in perfect sync with Vesper, was suddenly dragged beneath the surface. She would never resurface alive. They say if you keep a storm in a bottle, don't be surprised when it shatters. For years, warning signs had been ignored. On that day, the storm broke. Emily Cadeaux was just 24 years old when her life ended in the most brutal way imaginable. Born and raised in Sarasota, she had always been captivated by the ocean. While most girls her age idolized pop stars, Emily's walls were covered in pictures of orcas, dolphins, and coral reefs. At 19, she landed an internship at Ocean World Marine Park, setting her on the path to a dream career. By 21, she was a full-time trainer, and by 23, she had earned the prestigious title of Senior Orca Handler. It was a rare achievement for someone so young and came with great responsibility. But Emily wasn't just a trainer. She was known for her calm, unshakable presence around the animals. Even the most unpredictable orcas responded to her. She had a special bond with Vesper, one that seemed unbreakable. Other trainers recalled how Vesper would ignore everyone else but would always respond to Emily. It was like he was waiting for her, one trainer said. Their relationship was built on trust, or so everyone thought. Emily believed that harmony was possible between humans and these magnificent predators. But, as the saying goes, you can teach a lion tricks, but you can never forget it still remembers the hunt. Vesper had never forgotten. Ocean World Marine Park, a major attraction since its opening in 1986, had always been a hub for marine entertainment. Drawing over 1.2 million visitors a year, it showcased the power and beauty of ocean creatures, including stunning orca performances. But beneath the surface, the cracks were starting to show. Despite the park's popularity, its orca program was facing growing challenges. Audiences were growing weary, and internal reports revealed troubling behavior changes in the orcas. Their routines were becoming less reliable, and their performances more erratic. The park's foundation, built on spectacle, was beginning to crumble, but no one seemed willing to confront the danger lurking below. And then there was Vesper. Unlike other orcas at Ocean World, Vesper was particularly large and powerful, a 6-ton bull whose sheer size commanded respect. Born in captivity, Vesper's early years were marked by trauma. His mother died during transport when he was just a calf, a loss that left him with deep emotional scars. He had never known the freedom of the open ocean, only the confines of his tank. While many orcas at Ocean World had been bred in captivity for generations, Vesper's birth was controversial from the start. The violent separation from his mother at such a young age had disrupted the vital, emotional bonding orcas experience in the wild. Vesper's behavior had become increasingly erratic. Some days he performed flawlessly, gliding through the water alongside Emily in perfect harmony, to the cheers of the crowd. But other days his movements were sharp and erratic, his aggression simmering beneath the surface. It was as if he carried a grudge against the life he was trapped in, against the very world that kept him in a cage. In the days leading up to Emily's final show, Vesper's behavior had taken a dark turn. He became distant, uninterested, almost as if he were shutting out the world. One trainer recalled how, just days before the incident, Vesper refused to follow any commands, swimming in tight circles and slapping his tail violently against the water. It wasn't playful, it was a warning. Emily, who had worked with Vesper for years, noticed these changes too. She couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, but like so many others, she pushed those concerns aside. She hoped it was just a phase and that Vesper would return to his usual routine, but deep down, she knew the truth. No matter how much you train a wild animal, its instincts are always lurking just beneath the surface. Vesper's rebellion had begun long before the attack. It started small, like cracks forming in a dam, but but they were impossible to ignore. During training, his movements became unpredictable. He slapped his tail against the water in loud, violent bursts, no longer a sign of excitement but of agitation. His eyes, once warm and responsive, turned cold and distant. He seemed to test the limits of his relationship with Emily. He ignored her commands, refused to swim on cue, and retreated to the farthest corner of the pool. Something inside him had shifted. His behavior escalated when he started charging the underwater gates, an alarming sign of frustration seen in other orcas who had grown desperate in captivity. The massive animal would slam his body into the steel barriers, rattling the entire tank with a deafening sound. Vesper wasn't just angry, he was trying to escape. Emily couldn't ignore the signs. She documented everything: the tail slaps, the aggression, the refusal to cooperate. She wrote a report warning her superiors that Vesper wasn't the same orca he had been months ago, that he was dangerous. She sent an email to senior management. "He's not safe to work with," she said. But instead of taking her concerns seriously, the response was cold and dismissive. "It just needs more stimulation," one manager wrote. "Let's not cause panic before the summer launch." They promised Emily they would monitor Vesper, but the show would go on as planned. Money and spectacle took precedence. Emily knew that Vesper didn't need distractions. He needed space. He needed freedom. He needed to be an orca, not a performer. But in the world of Ocean World, freedom wasn't a luxury these animals could afford. Despite her concerns, the show was set to go ahead. The park was packed that afternoon, buzzing with excitement. The crowd was eager to see the 300th live performance of the summer. Emily had worked tirelessly for this moment, and though she had noticed Vesper's increasingly erratic behavior, she trusted that he would pull through, just as he always had. Today was supposed to be a celebration. Nothing would go wrong. The performance started, and for a brief moment, everything seemed perfect. Emily and Vesper swam in perfect synchrony, and the audience was mesmerized. But as the show reached its finale, everything changed. Vesper broke formation. One moment he was following Emily, and the next he lunged. He swam behind her and without warning seized her with his massive jaws. He thrashed her violently through the water, spinning her like a rag doll. The force was overwhelming. Emily couldn't break free. At first, the audience watched, confused, unsure of what was happening. But as the thrashing continued, panic set in. Screams filled the air as the reality of the situation sank in. The staff rushed to intervene, but they were too far away. The park's emergency protocols kicked in, but their efforts were futile. Lifeguards used buzzers and nets to distract Vesper, but he refused to release his grip. The orca's strength was unmatched, and Emily's fate was sealed. As the chaos unfolded, the crowd froze in horror, some rushing to escape, others unable to look away from the nightmare before them. For those closest to the pool, the sight was chilling. Blood began to stain the water, turning the once clear pool into a crimson nightmare. The water churned violently as Vesper dragged Emily beneath the surface, his massive body thrashing, slicing through the water with terrifying power. Emily's lifeless form was tossed around like a rag doll, her body no match for his strength. Desperate staff threw everything they had at Vesper nets, distractions, anything to break his hold, but the orca wasn't listening. This wasn't the trained animal Emily had worked with for years. This was something primal, a creature driven by raw, uncontrollable instinct, a force of nature reclaiming its freedom. As Emily was pulled deeper under the water, the worst fears of the audience were realized. Blood filled the pool in a grotesque display, and the air, once filled with excitement, now buzzed with terror. By the time rescue teams arrived to pull Vesper away, it was too late. Emily was gone. Some say that when an animal attacks its handler, it's a reflection of captivity, the release of years of frustration, pain, and longing for freedom. They say you can cage the beast, but you can never cage its heart. And on that day, Vesper's heart broke free. The chaos didn't end with Emily's body being released from Vesper's grip. In those agonizing moments, trainers scrambled, trying to regain control, reaching for anything to break the orca's fury. They threw fish buckets, used whistles, and clapped, all in a desperate attempt to save her. But Vesper's rage was too much. He was no longer the animal they knew. He had become something else entirely. As the staff worked in a panic, the audience, frozen in fear, was evacuated. But no one could tear their eyes away from the unfolding horror. It took 29 long minutes for the rescue team to retrieve Emily's body, but every second that passed was a second too late. The hope that something could be done slipped further away with each passing moment. When paramedics finally reached her, the cold truth hit. Emily was gone. An autopsy the following day revealed the horrific extent of her injuries. Multiple blunt force trauma wounds, likely from the violent strikes of Vesper's tail and the underwater thrashing, showed the power the Orca had unleashed. Internal bleeding, broken bones. No human could have survived the force of a 6-ton predator. But perhaps the most chilling discovery was that Emily had drowned. Despite being pulled from the water, the damage had already been done. Vesper had held her down, submerging her for too long. The autopsy also revealed significant tissue loss on her legs and shoulders, confirming the brutality of Vesper's attack. It wasn't just an attack, it was a wild animal, driven by frustration, rage, and the unrelenting need for freedom. Vesper had snapped. The loss was devastating. A young woman, full of promise and love for the creatures she worked with, was gone in an instant. Her friends and colleagues, left to pick up the pieces, struggled to comprehend the tragedy that had unfolded. The world was soon made aware of Emily's death, and Ocean World moved quickly to control the narrative. A press statement labeled it a tragic accident during a training demonstration, framing it as an unforeseeable mishap. There was no mention of the escalating signs of aggression from Vesper. No acknowledgement of the warnings Emily had given. It was a deliberate attempt to downplay the tragedy and protect the park's image. But behind the scenes, the truth began to leak. Whistleblower emails surfaced, revealing a chilling reality. They deleted all behavior reports from Vesper's file, one email read. Everything flagged about his aggression, gone. They didn't want anyone to know how bad it really was. The revelation sent shockwaves through the marine industry. Vesper had shown undeniable signs of aggression, but instead of taking action, management had erased the evidence to protect their profits. Despite the growing public outcry, the story continued to unfold, and the truth about the park's negligence couldn't be hidden for long. The government quickly launched an investigation into Emily's death, but it was clear from the start that it wasn't going to be as thorough as many had hoped. Ocean World's legal team worked relentlessly to control the flow of information, and despite mounting evidence of negligence, the inquiry concluded with a weak, unsurprising statement. No criminal charges will be filed in connection with the incident. It was an easy, clean escape for the park, no accountability, no consequences. What many had hoped would be a chance for justice ended in silence, leaving the public with more questions than answers. In the aftermath, Vesper was locked away in isolation, far from the stage and the audience. He was no longer a performer, but his punishment wasn't for killing Emily. It was for show, a symbolic gesture meant to reassure the public that something had been done. But the truth was clear to those who saw the whole picture. Vesper was still a prisoner, and now he was alone in his own solitary confinement. Far from the freedom he once knew in the wild. The scars of captivity ran deep, and as the saying goes, a leopard doesn't change its spots. Vesper was still the same animal, but now in a different cage. The death of Emily Cadeaux wasn't just a tragic accident. It was the result of years of neglect, corporate greed, and a system that cared more about profits than the well-being of the animals it exploited. While Ocean World moved on, continuing its shows and reaping the rewards, the shadow of that day, of the blood in the water, lingered in the hearts of those who knew the truth. For Emily's family, friends, and co-workers, the nightmare was far from over. 2 months after the attack, Ocean World quietly ended its live Orca shows, making no announcement, no grand gesture. It was as if the event had never happened, swept under the rug in hopes the public would forget. But for those who had witnessed the horror of June 5th, the memory was impossible to erase. It stayed with them, like a permanent scar. Vesper's fate was sealed in secrecy. The once celebrated Orca, star of countless performances, was transferred to an off-site veterinary facility under the cover of night. The park spun it as a routine move for rehabilitation, but the truth was darker. It was a calculated attempt to distance the park from the disaster. Vesper was no longer part of their public-facing operations, no longer a symbol of their success. But as Vesper was hidden away, whispers began to spread. Anonymous staff members began leaking details about the Orca's behavior after the attack, revealing a much more troubling reality than the park was willing to admit. One email sent chills through those who read it. It described how, during feeding in July, Vesper attacked a male trainer. The trainer was lucky to escape, but the aggression was undeniable. Vesper had become a ticking time bomb, his frustration and anger intensifying in isolation. The truth was unsettling. Vesper's aggression had only worsened since the attack. The Orca, once trained to bond with humans, was now a dangerous force, his frustration boiling over in captivity. But Ocean World didn't want that story to get out. They didn't want the world to know just how much damage had been done, not just to Emily, but to the animal as well. Vesper became the tragic symbol of what happens when an animal is pushed too far. And Ocean World had no intention of letting that story come to light. As the months passed, the public grew more curious about his fate, but the park stayed silent. Some rumors suggested Vesper had been euthanized to prevent further incidents, while others claimed he'd been sent to another facility, hidden away where his behavior could be ignored. But like so many other details in the aftermath of the attack, the truth was elusive. In the end, Vesper's fate mirrored the darker side of captivity. He was locked away in the shadows, his powerful presence reduced to nothing but rumors and speculation. Out of sight, out of mind, they said. But those who knew the truth couldn't forget. The scars left by Emily's death and the treatment of Vesper would never be so easily erased. The public's reaction to Emily Cadeaux's death was explosive. What started as a quiet tragedy soon became an unstoppable force, one that would shake Ocean World and the entire marine park industry to its core. Social media erupted. Hashtags like "Justice for Emily" spread like wildfire. From animal rights activists to everyday people, the world began to demand accountability. The anger was palpable. The grief was real. How could this happen? Why was Emily's warning ignored? The outcry only grew louder. YouTube channels, news outlets, and activists seized the moment, amplifying calls for change. Emily's death became a rallying cry in the fight for Orca freedom, a turning point for the cause. And the message was clear: enough. One of the most powerful responses came in the form of a petition, one that demanded an end to captive Orca performances. Within weeks, it had gathered over 1.4 million signatures from people around the world, many of whom had never even visited a marine park. They stood in solidarity with Emily and the countless animals trapped in captivity. The financial impact on Ocean World was swift and severe. Stock prices plummeted, reflecting the growing public disapproval. Visitors, once eager to attend shows, now stayed away. The world was watching, and the tide was turning. Soon after, marine mammal shows across the country began to shut down. Other parks, sensing the shift, quietly scaled back their Orca performances. The message was clear, and the industry was reeling. As the saying goes, what's done in the dark will always come to light. For Ocean World, that darkness had been exposed. Emily Cadeaux's death became a pivotal moment, a call for change that could not be ignored. Though her passing was tragic, it sparked a movement, one that demanded an end to the exploitation of orcas in captivity. Emily Cadeaux's death wasn't just the loss of a dedicated trainer, it was a wake-up call to the world. Her story serves as a reminder that even the most trained predators are still wild at heart. No matter how long they're tamed, the instinct to be free will always remain. Her death was tragic, but it marked a turning point. It proved that the exploitation of animals for entertainment doesn't just endanger them, it puts everyone at risk. If you believe animals deserve to live free from captivity, join the fight for their freedom. Share this video, like, and subscribe to help spread the message. Together, we can make a difference. Thank you for watching.